Hi, welcome to another edition of Out of the Park. The World Cup is here. It's finally begun. Last night, you had the terrific match, terrific for New Zealand, not so terrific for England. That set the World Cup in motion. Many, many things to talk about that, which all of you, I'm sure, must have seen, read about on television, all the experts with the expertise, tons of reporters there writing some great stuff. We're trying to look at the World Cup in a slightly out of the park kind of a way, a little bit over the top, a little bit maybe outside the general boundaries of what is seen as World Cup reportage. All right, so a lot of people are asking me, why aren't you covering the World Cup? So I'm saying, no, I'm not. I'm really at home. I'm just watching the games on television. This is the first time since, I think, 2003. And before that, I covered a little bit of 1996 that I won't be at World Cup games. And so then they ask me, are you going to miss it? Aren't you missing the buzz? Aren't you missing the sort of traveling around? And I said, yeah, most of the times the answer is no. Sometimes it's yes. I miss meeting a lot of my friends in the cricket world. And a World Cup is a great event that everyone comes to us. Hey, I didn't see you in 4 years' time. Hey, you're looking fab. But the good thing is the World Cup is now being held in my country where everyone's come home. So I can I'll be meeting all of them. There are teams passing through Bangalore and I'm going to meet all my old and not so old friends and talk about cricket and share gossip and so on. That's the most brilliant thing about it. The fact that the World Cup has started now, immediately the first game has turned everything on its head. Not not for sort of a long term kind of thing, but just for that first rush of adrenaline, like England have lost. That kind of turned everything on its head. And I'm going to go back, like I keep saying, looking at bets and the odds that are there on teams, and immediately there's been a change. I go to this website. I'm not trying to promote it. It's called Odds Checker, because you get all various betting companies add odds on it, and you can look through it and see how it's going. So India is still the favorite. Australia are number 2. England is number 3, and New Zealand has suddenly gone from being 7 or 8 to 1 to absolutely being something like 6.5 to 1 or whatever it is. South Africa has slipped, but wait until South Africa start and something mad happens, and then we'll see the entire sort of circus turn around and do its thing again. And right now, I think I have missed the main headline, because this show is supposed to be like a preamble or a setup to the India versus Australia game. Well, India fans, the sky has fallen. Shubman Gill is not going to be playing that game because he's ill. Now, we don't know whether he's got dengue, which is what one report says, or whether he's got just a little bit of fever and he could be better. I mean, the dengue report sounds a little bit scary, but believable because of where it comes from. I won't go into all that. Or maybe it's just a way of, sort of trying to get everyone excited and trying to set, and then Shubman Gill will turn up like Superman in the next match and score 100 and we'll be fine. So that's the Shubman Gill story for now. Ishan Kishan is going to replace him pretty much. So you'll have your left hand, right hand combination at the top of the order. What the World Cup will also show us, I think, very interesting article I read yesterday by Nathan Lehman, who is the analyst of the England and Wales Cricket Board. And he is also, he's a data analyst with the England team. And he's also written this terrific novel called The Test. If anyone wants to figure out what it's like being an international cricketer, playing, say, an Ashes Test match, in their head, Nathan Lehman's book is it. So Nathan Lehman writes and says that, look, the one-day game that's being played at this point is actually being played with very little information about what skill sets you need to bring to it. Because what's happening is that the predominance of 2020 cricket, between the last World Cup in 2019 and this one, has just escalated. Literally, I was looking at the numbers for an article that I was doing that'll appear in a couple of days. And you find that England have halved the number of T20 one-day internationals that they play, and similar things with Australia have played literally barely 2 dozen games or so. Really, the numbers have dropped dramatically of one-dayers because bilateral one-dayers are not profitable, beneficial, whatever. So Nathan Lehman is saying that when people come into one-day cricket, they don't really know what to do because they're coming in with a T20 mindset. Similarly, like when in the early days of the World Cup, test match cricketers came into one-day cricket with a test match mindset. So there'll be a whole lot of teams that are, you'll see batsmen, batters and bowlers sort of trying to come to terms with this business of having an opportunity to bowl 10 overs? Do they have the game? Do they have the skills to sustain themselves over these 10 overs, particularly the newer, younger players that are coming through? Another very interesting facet of this World Cup is the fact that it's being played in a country with wide variations in conditions, wide variations in the kind of wickets that you're going to get and how they'll behave in the first innings and in the second innings, right? So you've got you'll be playing in Dharamshala, which is at altitude. You'll be playing at sea level in Chennai and in Mumbai. You'll be getting sea breeze in at some point of the day. So there's all these things that will come into play. Then there's Delhi. Then there's Lucknow, which has this crazy new ground, and a relayed pitch. So everything has the possibility of absolutely exploding in all the team, in the faces of all the teams that are there. The other thing that we saw yesterday, and this is based on all what the gurus are saying, that New Zealand played a very old style form of cricket. They played with part timers, which nobody does anymore because of the fact that everyone gets hammered in the middle overs. All bowlers get hammered in the middle overs, but they succeeded in containing England. So this is the kind of tournament that we're going to have. This is the kind of range of talent that we will see. And we had expected there to be high scores, but 282 is not a very high score, going by modern day standards. And that's why New Zealand were able to come back. The other thing that happens is that wickets play out differently once the sun sets in parts of the country. There's dew involved. So there's a combination of things, and really teams that make these very smart choices of who's going to play against which opposition on what day and where is the teams that are going to succeed. One of the other aspects, as we saw yesterday of the game, which you're hearing a lot about, is why were the stands so empty? And it looked terrible. The optics were bad for the first day there was no opening ceremony. And I don't think any of that would have mattered had India been played the first game, because you'd have filled in the crowds, no matter in which stadium. And there would have been a little bit of energy and a little bit of, a little bit is wrong, a lot of energy and a lot of excitement about the fact that the home team was playing its first match, which usually is involved in when big competitions happen, including like the Football World Cup. The home team plays the first game. So this is the choice that was made. So as part of Out of the Park, I talked to just a short while ago to Professor Ratnakar Shetty, who has been a very seasoned cricket administrator in the Mumbai Cricket Association and in the BCCI, and he was also the tournament director of the ICC's 2011 Cricket World Cup. It's a fascinating conversation with Professor Shetty, which tells a lot of stories about his time as tournament director. Of course, in this World Cup, we do not have a tournament director, but I'll come to that later. First, let's hear from Professor Shetty. Delighted to have with me here today Professor Ratnakar Shetty, cricket administrator, India team manager, man of many parts. One of the first cricket officials I met when I joined the profession. It's good to have Professor here. Thank you so much, Professor, for being in the show, which is called Out of the Park. So we want some thoda bade shots kind of we want to happen when we speak with you. Professor was in the BCCI for more than 30 years and in Mumbai Cricket Association more than 30 years. And most importantly, he occupied a position that is now invisible. He was tournament director of the ICC 2011 Cricket World Cup that was held in India, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. And we're going to talk to Professor about all these things, about what it is to organize a tournament, what it means to have India playing. And I'm also going to speak a little bit about Professor's extremely fascinating book about his life in the BCCI. It's called On Board, Test, Trial and Triumph, My Years in BCCI. We'll get to that in a little bit. Professor, again, welcome. Firstly, I wanted to ask you, what did you think about yesterday's game, and what did you think about the crowds that were there? We all were surprised, or maybe not so surprised, that the crowd was very thin, and for an opening day of a very, very big tournament that so many people are interested in, it was a little bit flat.
Thanks, Sharda, first of all, for being on this show. Well, yesterday I did watch the game to some extent. And I was not surprised, honestly, looking at the number of people who turned up for the game in the initial part of the game. It was sunny, hot, and even if you give free tickets, I don't think people will come and roast themselves in the stadium. Uh, but the fact remains that if you have followed Indian cricket over the years, I think in the last 10 years or so, even for India matches, particularly the ODIs, I don't think any stadium is full uh, in a bilateral series also. And in a World Cup game where your neutral teams are playing, it is going to be more emphatic as seen on a television. Uh, People will come for the India games, but I don't know how many of the neutral games will be full during the tournament. And uh, I think in 2011 also we had the same problem when all India games were full. Not all the neutral games were full at the stadiums. But this being a huge stadium of a capacity of 130,000, it becomes for looks. You feel, oh, I mean, it's an empty stadium. Even if there are 10,000 or 20,000 people watching the game at some point of time yesterday, the feeling one got was that it's an empty stadium.
And that makes for bad optics in the sense of television, of wanting to have a crowd at the back and seeing people and excitement. And one thing also to point out, I was chatting with Professor just before we started recording, is that the old Motera Stadium that was there, it had a capacity of about 30, 35, maybe 30, I don't know, 39, depending on how many you got into the bleachers. And even if there were that many people in that ground yesterday, it would, it would look empty. If you had the old Motera Stadium, the ground would have looked packed. So that's the other sort of issue. Professor, I wanted to ask you, in 2011, when you took on the role of tournament director, and this thing about the crowds came up, this issue came up, you saw it. Did the broadcasters come to you and say, look, this is not looking good. Can we do something about the tickets? That's sort of one question. But before that, maybe we should have started with an India match first of all. Like literally, the first game should have been an India game, no matter where it was held. You put an India game in the stadium in Ahmedabad, in the Narendra Modi Stadium, and it would have filled up. Maybe that kind of scheduling could have been thought of.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you. But this scheduling, the ICC does it, the program of fixtures, and venues are allotted by BCCI. Probably an India game to start off the World Cup would have been a good idea, with the crowd behind the team and a full stadium would have had a different spectacle to watch on television. Definitely, I think that could have been a solution to this problem. But now we go on with the rest of the tournament as it comes.
Right. We'll probably have to turn to the ICC and say, why did you start like this? And I think I understand, but I don't understand. I think it's an illogical thing if you're doing it then. But I'm not getting you into making some dangerous kind of a statement. That you needed to have an India game in such a big stadium if you want to play. Anyhow, different topic. Tell us about your time as tournament director. The responsibility that it was, you're sharing it with 2-3 countries. Even it was fine if India had been playing yesterday, it didn't even matter that there was no opening ceremony in that sense. Every India match is a big ceremony. Yeah. It's a big. So tell us something about what did the tournament director have to do? How many plates did you have flying in the air when it was going on? What was that experience like to run a tournament as big as the World Cup, even though you had 2 other countries that were sharing some of the hosting sort of load of matches and so on?
I had been to the ICC Cricket World Cup 2007 in West Indies for the 2 semi-finals and the final game. And it was a sad thing to watch that the locals had not come to the stadium because the tickets were priced quite high. And without West Indies for the neutral teams again, we saw the same effect there, including the final match. And West Indies crowd is something which really enjoys their cricket, and the absence of the crowds really mattered. And to add to the difficulty of ICC, both India and Pakistan had gone out of the tournament too early for them. As a result, the whole tournament actually had collapsed in terms of people who turned up for the games and the spectator support. Even on television, I feel that. Therefore, when this tournament was allotted to the subcontinent, I still remember the first meeting that we had with ICC and the BCCI top bosses. The issue that was discussed is how we can come out of this problem while organizing the event in the subcontinent, because ODI existence was in a challenge at that time. People were talking about whether ODI will remain or should continue as a format for the future based on that observation of West Indies. And therefore, in our meeting, we took a decision that the ticket prices should be low for neutral games, number one. And number two, we had requested all the state units, including Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, where they were having, if there are neutral games, then they should invite school and college cricketers to the games, so that you keep aside about 5,000 tickets for such crowd. And we did that at Wankhede Stadium successfully, actually, because there were two neutral games before the World Cup final, and we could manage almost 3/4 of the stadiums to be full for those two games. And it was really good, nice to see the young crowd coming and enjoying the World Cup fixtures. We did that in the 2011 World Cup. And of course, India games were all full, and the knockout games in particular. Ahmedabad hosted the quarterfinal between India and Australia, and it was an amazing atmosphere at the old Motera Stadium.
So I remember being at that game, and I remember, it was just, and again, that's just 30,000 people or whatever, 40,000 maximum, if you can.
Yeah.
But it was incredible. It was a chase. It was a tough game. Everyone remembers Yuvraj Singh and his partnership with Suresh Raina and so on. And so that's my memory of Ahmedabad, even though the rest of the stadium was not in good shape. It was where we were sitting in the press box. It was a little bit shabby and whatever. But I still remember that game because it was absolutely absolutely electric. So, Prof, now obviously in the middle of all kinds of work that the tournament director has to do. So what is the toughest part? And secondly, we are doing this program, we're doing this a little conversation we're having just in the run-up to the India-Australia match in Chennai. And how does an India match totally change the organizational demands that are there on people that are doing World Cups or organizing big tournaments like this?
While organizing a multi-nation tournament, with Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and India jointly hosting the World Cup, the issues are slightly different. This is the first time after 1987, 96, 2011 that only India is hosting the World Cup, and the challenges therefore are different, with so many non-India games that are being hosted by the state units. That's one thing that is different. In 2011, while hosting the World Cup, one issue that we faced was of the security concerns which the teams had in the Asian subcontinent, which is natural at all times. And the other was of visa issues. Just a couple of months before the World Cup, the central government had issued a directive that a person who leaves the country cannot come back to the country within 2 months.
Right.
And that became a problem for us. So we had to start meetings with the Home Ministry. And finally, the government took a decision that that rule will not apply to the teams, support staff, the officials of that board and all that. And as far as spectators are concerned, all those who are holding tickets for the matches in India, that rule won't apply. So these kind of issues do come up. And one more difference that I saw as a tournament director, I must say this, I've written a book also, that Sri Lanka and Bangladesh governments went out of their way to make this tournament According to them, it was a prestige issue. They wanted the people to enjoy the event, and no efforts were spared by the government, whether it was hoardings or whether it was welcome arches, welcome stands in the airports, etc.
Oh,
We didn't get that. We didn't do much, I would say that. And for example, we requested the government for a welcome booth at the airports. While the civil aviation minister agreed to it, but in actually when we went for it, we were asked to pay money for that, which
goodness.
we
How much, if I may
because
interrupt?
I mean it was huge amount, and ICC couldn't really agree to that because it was an world event, and it should have been seen in that aspect. But unfortunately, we lagged in that front. I would say, even in the cities where the matches were played, we have one psychology in India that for bilateral matches, no matter what happens, people are going to come to the stadium. So you need not put up banners and you need not publicize the matches and all that. But for a World Cup, it should have been slightly different. Welcome arches or inviting the teams to the city. That's something which we lagged, I would say.
And that is because you had sort of almost faced barriers, institutional barriers in that sense from government and so on, that we can't be bothered to do this because people will come. That's a very interesting thing, because the same thing seems to be happening now with even less sort of enthusiasm in that sense, because we do remember a little bit of banners and general advertising hoardings and so on. But now when people are traveling around, they're saying we don't see that. I think Mumbai has some very nice Rangoli type things in some places, but yeah.
Yeah, those are things which are beyond our control. We always look at the government to participate in these events. But maybe because BCCI was looked at differently as a sports body, which was not a part of the national federations.
Yes. And it was always in confrontation in that sense with the government. There was always sort of pull and tug going on, wasn't it? No matter who was in.
I wouldn't say we use the word confrontation, but we stood by the ethos by which BCCI was formed as a cricket controlling body, which will be autonomous and will not depend on government funding. To that extent, therefore, BCCI could not register as a national federation with the government, the sports ministry. And the sports ministry was insisting that you must be a member if you want to enjoy all the facilities. That's what actually happened.
Okay. That's fascinating. You didn't think about all these other things. You're just thinking about scheduling, ticketing, and there's this little backstory also that's going on. When it came to the ticketing, Prof, I think I have to mention here, it was fairly unexpected, I think, for a lot of us in India at the time, that the tickets were available about, I think, also that World Cup was played in good months. We played it in March and April, and tickets were available maybe 6-7 months before that, or was it?
In June 2010.
Yeah, so about 9-10 months before they actually it began, and people were able to access those tickets, which is what you're hearing from a lot of fans who remember that time. Prof, we've always talked about this a lot, but can you explain to our viewers here how complicated ticketing is in India? We could go on for about an hour, but as much as you can summarize it for anyone who's running a cricket match or a body featuring a big tournament. And again, sorry, just back to the previous question. We'll take care of the ticketing later. The question is, when an India match is involved, what is the difference? Because we're going to see India versus Australia in Chennai on Sunday. How does the temperature or whatever go up, or the intensity or the anxiety go up when there's an India game involved, particularly at the World Cup, because you were in the middle of it all the time?
Well, I think an India game is always different. I put it simply, you don't have to sell the game. It sells by itself. There are people who will wait for hours together to get a ticket if it is purchased on a booth. Now, of course, it's online, and that's the best part of it, because but at the same time, there is also, you must have heard of it, that in 1987, India was expected to reach the final at Eden Gardens, and we lost in Mumbai to England. And England played Australia in Eden Gardens. Suddenly, a lot of tickets were available in Eden Gardens because people who had bought tickets and struggled to get the tickets finally did not make it to the Eden Gardens. And, it affects, therefore, the number of spectators who are in the stadium for a final. So that's the difference that you will see when India plays and when India is not there in a game. The same thing happened with us for the final of 2011. We had a lot of pressure, to be very honest, from ICC as to what will happen if Pakistan reaches the final. It was a big question since everybody, the whole world knew that Bombay will be a difficult venue if it is a Pakistan match to be played in Mumbai. But I had a president in Mr. Sharad Pawar who was quite cool on this, and he says, "Let us wait for that moment. Why do you worry at this stage?" And that actually kept me, quite contained to that effect. Otherwise, answering ICC on every 2 weeks as to how it will matter, what will happen, was the issue that we faced in 2011. And with India reaching the final, I can tell you the demand for tickets, was tremendous. I still remember the President Box, which was of the Mumbai Cricket Association renovated stadium, had about 200 people sitting there, 220 people. We had the presidents of both the countries wanting to attend, and they came for the game. So that added so much on the pressure on us, actually, people running around to ensure that there's nothing wrong goes on at that point of time during the match. And almost all the top member of parliaments, I won't use the word ministers, because across parties, there were member of parliaments who came for that game. And same with the Maharashtra government, the ministers there. So the pressure is different when India plays, and particularly for a semi-final and final, one can really feel the heat.
So I remember someone telling me, I just had a conversation about this, that when Pakistan was playing, they had I think booked corporate boxes at the Wankhede Stadium, and when the India-Pakistan match was getting close, they started sweating because they said, what is going to happen to our corporate boxes if India loses? So those...
No, but that is, Sharda, that is what happened in Mohali. When Pakistan-India match was ultimately to be played, most of the top corporates of India had booked, like Mr. Ambani, they had booked the boxes well in advance. But they had to sacrifice their own boxes which they had paid for, so that we could accommodate guests from Pakistan. The Prime Minister had his entourage. Then there was the Prime Minister of India. Along with them, some of the Congress leaders did attend that game. And it was so nice of our corporates to really help us at that point of time. Otherwise, it was quite embarrassing, I would say.
Because in that match in 2011, it was held in the smallest stadium of all the World Cup venues, in Mohali. I remember being there for that game, and it was crazy because the press box was so full. I keep saying this, that if at one end you're sitting in a press box and your elbow moves at the other end, someone's coffee cup would fall off. It was absolutely packed, and there were because of the fact that the two prime ministers decided to show up. That was just the crazy thing, which is what happens at World Cups. I'm going to get to your book, Prof, before we sign off. We've had a lovely conversation. We could go on, but I'll not. So Professor's book is called On Board. And the cover photograph, which you will see, is of the victory of the Indian team at the 2004 series in Pakistan. Prof was manager there. That's a story for another entire episode. Um, and it says on board test trial triumph, my years in the BCCI. It's a fascinating book. One of my most fun paragraphs in this is referring to what happened after the 2013 IPL corruption scandal, and the court started getting involved. The Supreme Court started getting involved. So Prof writes here, it is with a heavy heart that I have to admit that most of the members of the BCCI rarely raised any pertinent issues in the AGM. This is now the board is under serious trouble. It's absolutely, the court is breathing down their neck. And their primary interest was to get either themselves or their representatives nominated on the various committees, and then to wait for the treasurer to announce the subsidy amount that each full member of the board would receive after the accounts were approved. Had the members been proactive and spoken up, many of the crises which the BCCI was confronted with could have been avoided. So, Prof, just tell us very quickly in summation, what is when you look back at your career and you see the BCCI where it was when you began and where it is now, just summarize the entire thing for us on this day, just a couple of days before India plays its first World Cup match, and then let's have your World Cup predictions as well.
Well, I think primarily I would start off with saying that, BCCI was established with probably no funds. There was no money in BCCI as late as maybe 1986 or 87. And it was hand to mouth in most of the cases. But one thing was sure, what I liked was that going through the past history of the board, I realized that people had sacrificed a lot, whether it was the office bearers or whether the royal families who supported the games or the corporates. And what happened was cricket never suffered. Cricket always took central position so far as BCCI is concerned. And that is probably the reason why we have the best domestic setup in cricket in the world, and which keeps on churning youngsters year after year, and new faces we come to see. And with IPL, of course, it has become faster. But even otherwise, domestic cricket provided a platform to a large number of cricketers in India. That's something which I really enjoyed reading. And over the years, the money started flowing in only after the Supreme Court decision, where Doordarshan was snubbed, and the order was passed that international cricket matches played in India are a property of BCCI, and Doordarshan, like any other telecaster, will have to bid for the rights. That was the change that happened, and it changed BCCI for good. Monetarily, we became stronger, and as years passed by, things changed a lot. Of course, IPL has put us in a different bracket altogether, so far as the finances are concerned. But from the start, where there was no money, to a position where we started getting a lot of money, I felt that I wrote that paragraph which you read. Actually, was an AGM of 2010, which I always tell people. And that AGM was was held in Mumbai. Shashank Manohar was the president, and it was attended by the Prime Minister, the present Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, who was then the president of Gujarat Cricket Association. And I was sitting next to him, and the accounts were passed in about 15 minutes time. And he asked me, he says, don't they discuss these accounts, because it runs into crores of rupees? And I had to explain to him that there is a finance committee which first goes through the auditor's reports and accounts. Then there's a working committee, and then it comes to the general body. So that is the reason why not much of discussion. But he was not, very, very happy with what I said. Not convinced, I would say, with what I said. I could realize that. And, that is why I wrote that paragraph. If all the members take interest in the working of the BCCI, in terms of financial discipline, in terms of the cricketing activities. Uh, I think a lot good will happen. And I feel proud that India has got some of the best stadiums in the world so far as cricket is concerned, and therefore the whole World Cup being held in India is a matter of great pride for me. In the last 10, 20, 10 or 15 years, I think you go across India and you find some of the beautiful stadiums which can match any stadium in the world in terms of facilities when it comes to that. And so I wrote that, and I mean it basically. I feel that each association must take interest in the working of the parent body also, and not just wait for what you can benefit out of the BCCI, but how we can strengthen the parent body. And that's important, particularly because when there is more money coming into the game, I think all of us have got a huge responsibility to ensure that we don't land up again in courts where nasty comments are passed by the judges, and the recommendations of Loda committee. If you go through the book, uh, you'll find a lot of issues that are raised, and we could not really substantiate that. And that's something which I felt was my view, and that's why I put that on in the book.
No, no, thank you so much for putting it in the book. Honestly, it's such a revealing, sort of an illuminating, paragraph. Just before we ask Professor his predictions, the reason he's called Professor is because he's actually a professor of chemistry at Wilson College in Mumbai, and taught students. I mean, I know students. One of my cousins studied in Wilson College when Prof was teaching, and what he was talking about, the fact that people were doing basically a job along with doing other jobs when the BCCI had no money.
Yes.
So that's the story of Professor's life. It's in the book. You'll find out about it. Professor, your predictions for the World Cup semi-finals. Let's start with semi-finals, and then winner. We know whom you want to win, but let's go for the semi-finals to begin.
Well, I think even in 2011, when somebody asked me, I said India will win. He said that you are the tournament director. How can you predict? But I feel that our side is good. We have a balanced team, and we are doing well. So India, Australia, New Zealand, England, and Pakistan. I think these 5 teams are my favorites to reach the semi-finals. And I only hope and pray that all the matches are played in good spirit, and India plays well in all their games.
Professor Ratnakar Shetty, thank you so much for being here on Out of the Park. It was wonderful talking to you. Thank you once again, and yes, fingers crossed for how the World Cup goes.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
A great conversation with Professor Shetty there, because you understood what it takes to organize a big tournament and a big match in India, and all the kind of plates that have to be spinning in the air for people that are there, and why it's such a massive deal for there to be really people with given power and sort of the powers of both decision making and the powers of delegation. We don't have a tournament director in this tournament for reasons that are not explained to us, but that's all right. It's playing out itself in the way that it's playing out. I wanted to introduce 2 sections into this into Out of the Park. One of which is to be called fans' voice, because honestly, the Indian fans don't really have a voice in Indian cricket. So I wanted to talk about what the fans are going through. Largely, I'll go through the social media and tell you what's going on. There's a Twitter feed which took a little shot of the chairs inside the seating inside the Narendra Modi Stadium yesterday, and he said, "I'm not even going to talk about dust. I'm going to talk about and just look at the amount of bird droppings that are there." So nobody is bothered to clean that stadium. Now I'll tell you a great story about the fact that this giant stadium has come into place, but you need people to fill it. This is not a political rally, so people won't come and fill it spontaneously out of love for the person the political party or leader they're supporting, and so on. This is a cricket match played in Ahmedabad, which will be blisteringly and blindingly hot. I mean, the heat in Ahmedabad gets behind your eyes. It's like that. If you have a smaller stadium where you play your first match, right? So Professor Shetty says that the choice of the first match was the ICC's. The choice of the venue was the BCCI's, right? If you had played that match in, say, a smaller stadium, you would have filled it. You're not 100%, but 75% capacity. Had this match been played in the old Motera, 30,000 people, it's full. I mean, it looks like it's packed. And that's what you kind of need. I mean, that's what the TV people need. And that seems to be what the BCCI cares about a lot. What they say. The other thing that's happened with the fans, of course, is people with visas trying to get in. I'm hearing accounts, never mind reporters who can't get visas. I'm hearing accounts of cricket fans in the United States who have been born in the United States. Their parents left Pakistan 50 years ago, and they're being told, I'm sorry, you have to apply with a Pakistani visa. And that person has never been to Pakistan. That person has never had a Pakistani passport, whoever the individual from where the story came. So you're hearing these things about the fans. The other thing about the fact of that the stadium was empty also has to do that there were no tickets accessible to the fans who wanted to buy them. There is a large number of fans Ahmedabad is a cricket crazy city. You should go in the summers and see night cricket that happens in Ahmedabad. Ahmedabad is the home of Cricket Heroes, one of my favorite cricket apps, which is made for the average player. So it's just getting a lot of bad pressing, or people don't want to come. They're not that interested. They're only interested in business, all those cliches. That's absolute rubbish. So this is what's happening with the fans. We're still here. We're still hearing stories about how there's no excitement about the World Cup. There's not enough there's not enough a buzz about it. And I think when India plays against Australia and Chennai, we'll get all of that in spades. But this is what it is. This is where we are at this point. The fans are going to speak. This is all the reason why I put in fan voice is largely because I'm going to trawl through social media, do this the lazy way, and come and tell you stories. This is the first World Cup that is being held with the absolute thunderstorm that is social media. This is the first time a World Cup is being held in India with social media and the fan's voice actually being audible, visible, the fan being visible and the voice being audible there. So, I mean, I'm going to be looking at it. The first one, I saw the Modi Stadium seats and I was just really felt sad because it's a new stadium. I mean, the old Motera was also quite shabby. It was also quite really awful. I mean, I remember going to the India-Australia quarterfinal in 2011, and the seats were dirty in the press box. The seats were dirty. It was just like not clean. I'm saying you're doing the same thing again on this flashy-looking giant stadium of 110,000 or 30,000. We are not sure number of people. And my final segment. So fans. So I'll have I'll talk a little bit. I'll do the interview. I'll do the fans' voice, and my final segment is what we called I'm trying not to think it's political. This has come about because a friend in Bhubaneswar, we suddenly were introduced to the fact that the Indian team wore these orange uniforms yesterday during training. So my friend just says, I'm trying not to think it's political. So that's what this is going to be. I'm trying not to think it's political. The first interesting piece of news today in I'm trying not to think it's political, which I'm trying not to think, is that there is a serious discussion underway at various layers of the people that are running this Cricket World Cup, that the Indian team may not, should, could possibly play again when playing Pakistan on the 14th, could or should be wearing a predominantly saffron jersey. That's one of the things coming out of these discussions that are going on. It's literally, I had 4 things to tell you before this, but now a 5th has been added literally about very recently. And what will happen is those jerseys, they'll play against Pakistan on the Sunday. Or is it a Sunday? They'll play against Pakistan in that jersey, and then that jersey will, in a classic sort of sports washing kind of gesture, it is possible, it is alleged, it is believed, it is going on, be auctioned off for UNICEF, right? So that's how it gets nicely laundered. So that's one thing. Also, I mean, I shouldn't be saying this, and I think I'm trying not to think it's political because it is. We're hearing that there are 2 or 3 things that are planned around this World Cup. One was, of course, are we going to say Team India? Are we going to say Team Bharat? Virendra Sehwag in his Twitter feed has said Bharat when Bharat is not playing. Akshay Kumar in his I'm supporting India in that cricket ka bhoot ads that are coming on TV. He says Bharat. But I think eventually the decision was right. Listen, we've always called this Team India, this Team Bharat. At this point in time, we'll complicate it, so we won't. So that's number one. Number two is that social media is going to be used. Number two is that there will be a large number of central government programs that are there that are going to be put to use when it comes to giving out, comes to putting up a show or making a little news snippet from matches that are held. That's number two. Number three, social media is going to be used by overseas cricketers that understand the benefits of saying good things in Naveen Bharat and in the new Bharat, in the Vishwaguru Bharat. Those social media feeds are going to appear. So that's number three. And number four is that if the Indian team does well, fingers crossed, if the Indian team starts doing well, you will get heads of state of other countries to come and watch. It'll be part of an exercise. But like I said, I'm trying not to think it's political. I'll see you next time. Bye.